This is a mic check for YouTube. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a mic check for Town Hall streams. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I don't have an agenda.
I only made one.
Oh,
Sorry.
Oh, you got an agenda?
You'll have to share.
Do you want me to bring, okay, so we're on the air, so I'm going to open the meeting.
Okay.
Hi to everybody. This is the December 12th meeting of the Kennebunkport Conservation Commission. I will bring copies of agendas if people would like. I just didn't want to bring them and have them go to waste, so. All right, so the first thing on the agenda is we need to vote to accept the minutes from the November 14th meeting, or not, but we need a motion of some sort.
A motion.
I've got them right here if anyone wants to have a look-see. Does anyone need to?
No, I have them. So we have a motion to accept,
I will second.
and all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? Okay. So, education outreach is next on the agenda. First, I just thought I wanted to recap what happened at the joint Kennebunk Conservation Commission, Kennebunkport Conservation Commission planning meeting. There was a lot of talking. Probably, I was hoping for a little bit more action at that meeting, but I think everybody was just sort of getting acquainted and talking about what we've done. We did hear from the Kennebunk Conservation Commission about their wetland mitigation ordinance that they have been working on, which has just gotten passed. And one thing that I thought was noteworthy was that it took them 3 years to go through the process, even though really nobody in town was against it. But it sounds like a really good ordinance and one that we may want to consider once we move our way through the pesticide ordinance. Because it kind of falls in that middle zone, so realtors, nobody seemed to really care about it, and yet it really picks up a lot of that fragmentation of wetlands that is such a problem. Anybody else who was there, which is I think everybody but Steve, want to make a comment or?
I did pick one thing up from that meeting. I haven't tried it yet because it's winter, but remember the woman Sally who said that she lived in Alabama and just simply putting a small fan on your table outside confused the mosquitoes and they lightened up? I haven't tried it, but if that works, that's an easy fix.
When I was down in Austin, my family had like a little tiny table fan, almost looked like a helicopter propeller. You know, it wasn't, so it didn't like really blow things away, but they were using it for mosquitoes down there.
Yeah, and it must work.
Yeah, it's pretty effective, so maybe we should get a couple as demonstration projects or raffle them off somewhere.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay.
That would be
You
great.
heard of that?
I also liked that the way that they positioned the wetland mitigation ordinance which passed is by talking about how it fills in the gaps from what the state does. And I think that's kind of what we're aiming for with some of our work.
Yeah.
And so I really like that language. I think it will make sense to people.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I look forward to hopefully being able to bring this into our town pretty soon.
Excuse me, what are they trying to mitigate? To me, wetland mitigation means you want to mitigate wetlands.
For the areas of wetland that are, first I can get you a copy obviously, or you can go online to look at it, but for the areas of wetland that are too small to fall in the state guidelines, a single home builder or a developer has to put money in the kitty. And that money is being held by their land trust. And I don't recall what they said it was going to be used for. I don't know if it was direct mitigation.
Well, it's about if you're filling in. What I wrote down is 8 times as much as you fill if you're filling more than 500 square feet.
So you have to create a wetland. So yeah, so it would be direct mitigation.
Create a wetland.
Yeah, well, that's what they do on big projects, you know, the public projects where they're required by federal law to mitigate. But smaller groups don't have that requirement. So, okay, so anyway, the other thing I want to say is that I am having a quick Zoom meeting with the Kennebunk folks and the Planeteers to try to get organized in terms of what events we all have coming up in the first quarter. so that we can do outreach to all of our various audiences, as well as maybe add some others like master gardeners. We now have 140 names in our database, based on all the ones that we collected, which I would think is pretty exciting.
So you're meeting with who? Whom?
Kennebunk Conservation Trust, one of the people, and I think a couple of the Planeteers are gonna be
Okay.
there.
Okay.
Jen
Southern Maine.
Armstrong, and also Andrea, I forget her last name, but she's the head of the Planeteers. And Jen Shack also.
Okay.
So I kind of pushed on that because I said, just really, if they're doing things in January, we can't wait till January to meet, to get organized. on
Right.
this. So,
And we've got our event, which you're gonna probably highlight.
we only have one so far, so.
And that's January, isn't it?
February.
Oh, February.
February
Okay.
8th, I think.
February 8th.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Action items from the November meeting. Let me just do a run through here. I was supposed to talk to the trust about doing a brief article on us to underscore that we're actually two different entities, and I haven't done that because something else happened that I think is going to do that in a different way, and I'll get to that shortly. I was supposed to input the new names we got to Outlook, and yes, I did do that.
Great.
Took me a while, but I got to it.
Wait.
Oh, good.
I'm just doing this as an applause.
That's excellent, I like that.
All right. We'll keep that up if everyone hits.
Jen was to contact Julia McLeod of Piper Castle, and
She's
she
here.
has done so. Excellent. What else have we got? Steve was to complete the research on testing, and he has done that and given me a cost for the budget. So far we're
Awesome.
batting 1,000.
Thank you, Steve.
Robin was going to try to get more detail on where lobster fishers are seeing malformations, which is not critical now, but that's just,
I've been collecting that all along,
okay, all right.
but I'll,
So we should probably get that in writing at some point,
okay.
just so we know what we're talking about. I was supposed to follow up with the Beach Advisory Committee to update on our discussion in regards to funding for testing, and I have done that. The recommendation from Paul Hogan is that he thinks they would be likely to want to pay for testing in Goose Rocks Beach. The process would be, in January, we would be on they have a special subcommittee meeting of their Natural Resources Committee, and give them a presentation on what we want to do and why we want to do it. And if they then say yes, we can move ahead with it. Meanwhile, I've also got, as you'll see, some testing out of Goose Rocks Beach, supposedly in our budget, in our proposed budget. So. Then, okay, I had asked you guys if you thought we should re-up with the Maine Association of Conservation Commissions. Did anybody have a chance to look at their website?
I did 2 years ago when we re-upped. And it's, I just, what is the fee is nominal, right?
It's $125. I
Yeah,
mean, we
$125.
haven't used them for anything. Part of me thinks that we should sort of support them.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
Just because if we're a conservation commission and this is the association,
I mean, I would put it in the budget, and if we end up having to cut back the budget, that might be someplace we'd cut. But the town also might feel they want to support as well.
makes sense.
Did you get a chance to look at it, Karen?
I did not.
Okay. All right, so that's enough. And
The printed materials,
yes, we're getting
the
there.
brochures, okay.
All right, so the two other things have to do with cost estimates, and also with contacting the Beach Advisory Committee on path gateway plantings and consulting with the town on any locations they want to enhance, but that also has been superseded by a conversation that Steve had with Robin and the rest of you guys on where we might have our next spot be, so we can cover that later. All right. I think that a lot got done. Happy.
About the last page.
Okay, so, Goose Rocks Beach Invasives Project. Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about your suggestion about,
Wait, I'm sorry, can I just, this wasn't on the action item, it was on a previous action item.
oh, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
In terms of finishing the research around what pesticides are used in our schools, because we've done the research on the publicly owned parks,
Yep.
and that's known, and we have that data, but I did reach out, and I'm still awaiting a response from Alice, who is in charge of the, RSU grounds, and so she had responded and says it's coming, and she'll give us in our area, it's the consolidated school. I also asked for Kennebunk just because we had just previously met with their conservation commission. I thought, well, if we can get that information, great. So I just wanted to let you know, it's in the works. I know you had asked that question, Steve, a week or 10 ago, around, do we actually know what's going down on the consolidated schools' lawns? And so that's coming. We don't have it yet.
Okay, if I could comment on that, I had an email I sent to Chris Simeone that I forwarded to you,
Yeah?
because he, he's the head of the highways now. And he had said something at another meeting I was at about the consolidated school recreation field and what the grub problem and so on. So then I had some other questions, and he sent a summary back on what he does and what the town does for the rights of way. And he gave a name of who the person who would know about the school, and it was somebody in the Park and Recs department. Stephanie, somebody I can't remember.
Stephanie Simpson.
Simpson?
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't understand what,
So
does
Alice.
Parks and Rec do it, and the
Yeah.
person from school do it
Yeah.
also?
Alice Swan is the facilities manager for RSU 21, and so she's the one who's responsible for the grounds of the schools, so that's who I connected with, so,
Okay,
once we get that information, we can see if there's any holes, missing
yeah,
data points that we need to look into. But we should have a really good, complete picture of the parks and public lands then, and what's being used. So,
I think that's an important part of a presentation that we would ultimately have about what's happening in the town, too.
yeah.
So. Okay.
Sorry to.
That's right. So Steve, you sent an email out about possibly using this facility, where we sit now, and making that be our next project. So you want to just update everybody on
okay,
that?
well, we were searching for another project we could do as a demonstration. And it would be nice if it wasn't at the beach, but was inland someplace. So, when I noticed the other day how there's all invasives completely surrounding this lawn, I suggested it to Chris Simeone and the fire department person who was here, and they thought that was a good idea. But then when I looked at it more closely, it's a huge job. And then I sent you guys a summary, but I also talked to Paul Hogan about it, and he thought it was a great idea, but he also said it's a huge job, and we don't wanna, what did he say, wear out our elderly volunteers?
3 or 4 of them.
So, it's possible we could get the town to do some of it here, but they're in the, I
So we
think
could
they,
technically use, is it okay, is it appropriate for mechanical clearing?
well, I didn't ask about that, but it's not on the beach any longer, so.
But I just wondered if, like, where it is, if, you know what I'm saying, is there?
It's right back here, it's a huge, like, 100-foot by 100-foot area of just
Wow.
unbelievable.
Is it bittersweet mostly?
Oh,
is it-
it's
is it
all
everything?
possible invasives.
Well,
You could take pictures of them all and use them as
I'm
examples.
envisioning Robin's torch here. This could be exciting.
Yeah.
And
need a
right
very
adjacent
big
to the fire
torch.
station. I mean, how
It's a
perfect.
very big torch.
This is,
They often need practice with controlled burns, so.
There we go.
so I think
How
we
many things can we
maybe,
fulfill at once, right?
we maybe could, whoever's responsible in the town that we need to ask, maybe Werner, or, I don't know, Chris.
Yeah, why don't we just run it down and see if people think it's okay, and it would be visible, so, anyway.
Oh, and the other aspect of it is this could be used for a pollinator demonstration garden,
That'd be great.
since it's just a big disaster, and if you took it all out, it could be all replanted.
There's even bittersweet right here.
You know, right by the front door.
Mhm.
That might be a good pollinator place.
Yeah.
Actually, that would be
Something
too.
out front more visible than,
Right.
you know, even if we do treat that,
Right.
but having the, yeah,
'Cause that's
visibility.
Kind of spare looking for such a ritzy town.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, we could do better.
Anyway, I think that's promising. We'll see how it goes. Anybody, anything else on that before we?
I just wonder what was our intended timeline around that? Is this like sort of between now and spring, or now and, you know?
Well, we're still gonna have, and I'm gonna get to that, we're still gonna have work to do on the beach. So, I mean, it wouldn't break my heart to say we were gonna tackle it in 2024. You know, it's not the worst thing. Or maybe in the fall of this next year, depending on what needs to get done. So,
And remind us what's still left on the Goose Rocks Beach area, the replanting?
yes,
Okay.
and as well as ongoing maintenance.
Oh, ton, the bittersweet is still
We wouldn't
really
probably
in there.
plant until the fall.
Right.
Segue on that, the week of Thanksgiving, I got a call from, well, the town got a call from Southern Maine Planning, wondering if we were interested, the town was interested in doing any work to get a grant for from the Maine Community Foundation. And Lori contacted me and said she knew we were thinking of planting beach grass, and so would we be interested in, you know, having it funded by that and doing some work on it? And I said, yeah, because it'd be hard to ask for money after we turned down a potential grant. So it kind of blew up from there, because the minimum grant amount they were looking for was $20,000, which is a lot of beach grass. So, and I also wanted to keep the invasive message alive, so we ended up adding in public education on invasives, as well as doing restoration. And then I started looking at the amount of work that would be involved in that, and thinking to myself, I don't want to do all this myself. And so I asked if we could put an intern in as part of the grant. And the answer to that was yes, that would be an appropriate use of the grant money. And I asked if the town was willing to do that, and the town decided that since the Conservation Trust already has a intern program, that we could partner with them. We would still be, you know, monitoring, in charge of helping to build it, but we would have somebody to help us do, you know, to build a curriculum, to create materials, to do all that under our supervision. So, we went ahead with it, and we'll find out at the end of the month if we're gonna get it. The final amount, when all was said and done, and Robin was helpful in terms of, I kept going, I need to know how much the dune grass will cost.
Well, like I said, I looked into that. None of the nurseries are giving a concrete cost. Nobody does that anymore because of COVID, really. So she said, you know, between $300 and $350 for a plug, which I think is what we want, not, I mean, you know, a plug is like, put it in, don't worry about it.
Yep.
Otherwise, you may have to water or, you know what I mean?
Really? You don't have to water the plugs?
Not really.
How many plugs do we think we would
Well,
need?
for that area, I mean, the most would be like, you know, I'll let Carol answer that,
Well,
but
we put in,
I think around 600 for that spot.
I put in for 1,000, because
Yeah.
not only do we have the
Right.
original planting, but, you know, likely some of them are going to die and they'll have to be replanted. So I put in for 1,000, and we estimated it at $4 a pop because prices fluctuate. So, so that was actually a fairly small part of the grant. That was $4,000. The intern would be a 2-year program.
Great.
So the total amount of the grant ended up being almost $29,000.
And we'll know by the end of December?
Yep.
Okay, great.
So
And who are you working with at the trust at this point, or not?
Isaac.
Okay.
Isaac, who
Okay.
already does, we would have been working with him anyway because I partnered with him on that tree planting that Robin also helped me with, the lindens out by the grist mill. So he does projects with the camp, the rec camp, and in the schools already.
Okay.
So we can kind of piggyback on that. And also our new planner, whose name is escaping me.
Abby,
No, Abby's the one at the trust, at
Oh.
the Southern Maine Planning.
Michelle?
Michelle, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I couldn't. So anyway, we had to get it together in a week, so it was
Well, thank you.
quite a flurry, but.
so weren't we talking with the beach advisory committee about if there's extra grass, which I think there is?
Yes.
Because, we're obviously not gonna,
Yes.
there is stuff already there,
I talked to Paul and he
so he'll find a place to use
will
it.
find a place to put it
Right.
and we wouldn't have to be responsible for that.
Right.
But
But he will use it.
yes.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, well, I was hoping that we didn't have to like buy it all at once and keep it alive, but is that
It
what we
only
have to
comes,
do?
okay, this is the deal with it, you can only plant it March to April,
Right.
or in
Oc-
October to November.
Yep.
So that's the only time usually, the only time I've been able to get it is in the spring, but maybe because it's more popular to do that now, you can, and
So-
that's the other reason you don't have to worry so much about water, because if you're planting
That's a
in
rainy
March or
period.
April, it's
Right.
pretty wet. And it's dune grass, it lives in sand, or in the fall, we're past that baking period, so.
So you had told me that the earliest we could plant would be this coming fall of 2023.
I would
But if
think-
we had to put it off until the spring, because we could only get it in one fell swoop.
I'm not
that's
sure,
okay.
I'll call Pearson's and see if you can get it in the fall, but,
Okay.
you used to only be able to get it in the spring when I've done this project.
Okay.
So, I'll let you know,
All right, well, I'll find out if we get the grant, so we'll
yeah.
go ahead with that. Okay, moving on to the budget. I did bring copies of that.
Hooray.
So our budget this past year my printer is, right.
Should we share?
Was, yeah, I have enough, was $1,350. And we will have spent at the end of this month, if all goes well, $1,247. So we managed to spend most of that. However, so looking at 2000, so here's what we need to make a decision on, is what I've got projected for 2023 is rather a large jump. It's $6,325. I've put in, and we can circle back to this if this is not going to be enough, but for an additional 2 samples at the $500 a sample cost that Steve got me for testing outside Goose Rocks Beach for pesticides. I put in $500 for speaker fees and materials for workshops. And then Susan is working on a pledge, and you all seem to be up for that. And we heard still hear good comments about the Lawn for Lobsters program that was done a decade ago. And in the process of looking at this, I was horrified to find that most of the nice signs that you can get are $30 a pop.
Wow.
I did find some that are sort of not great at $8 a piece that we could probably, when we come down to it, I would probably try to find something that was customized and better. I did have a conversation with Lori to find out if we could sell them or sell them at a discount, because I just think that this is looking like a lot of money.
Right.
And what her response to me through Nicole, who's the finance person, was just budget for the signs.
Okay.
So that's what I've done. I just sort of put in 500, at $8 a piece, which is 4,000, so that's a significant amount of money. But, this budget will be one that we will propose, and we'll find out whether we're gonna get it or not. We'd have to make a case for it, so we would have to have a good pledge program pulled together.
So what are these signs made out of?
Excellent question. I think they're outside signs, and I think they're plastic. But this is almost like a placeholder, Robin, like I just found the cheapest ones I could find that would be okay, and then I figured that we would lean in really hard and find out what we could do.
So people are gonna put these in their yards?
Yeah, do you want to talk about your research on this?
Yeah, I've been kind of researching what other towns have been doing in other locations. I even went as far as Massachusetts to see what kinds of things were going on. And it's interesting, and probably most people here already know this, but it was new to me that when the Lawns for Lobsters program was initiated, other nearby communities were really interested in it, and several of them did a very similar type of program, and York is still doing it. And in fact, York slightly tweaked it, and they call theirs Lawns to Lobsters, sort of kind of creating that sense of what you're doing at home, is going to this spot and this spot and eventually into the sea. So I kind of liked their tweak of it. But they were, I don't know if they still are, they were also doing signs. And I think the cost of their signs must have been around $10, because when people committed to taking the pledge, I mean, you don't have to have it signed and notarized in front of somebody, but when you commit that you're going to do that, they offered the homeowners a sign and then recommended a $5 donation. And so that, I think, is how they were covering the cost of what is, kind of an expensive thing to do. And even at that price point, the signs are small. But I think there is some sort of sense of pride and ownership for people to be able to put the sign in the yard. So it makes sense to do, I think, if we decide to go forward, probably the best sign we can do, and see whether it makes sense to follow some of the other programs that people have done. And because neighboring communities are still using the lobster idea, it then allows us to think about whether we just want to try to kind of revive that and make it a broader group of communities doing more or less the same thing, or if we want to go out and reinvent the wheel. And again, I wasn't here in 2009, but everything that I've read and people I've talked to said that it was very well received, and a lot of people remember it and liked it. So it would be primarily updating the pledge, maybe talking about it in a new way. I think it might be a way that we present kind of a softer face of what we do to homeowners. They don't have to be inundated with as much data as some of the other things that we're doing, working on the ordinance, but getting people on board with doing less or no pesticide use while all of this is happening, and feeling like a part of the process as we go forward with the other things. So I really liked the Lawns for Lobsters brochure. You could still find it on the website.
We still have some, actually.
And it was well done. It was a trifold, I think.
Yeah.
So, we could talk about whether we wanted to use a similar format or do something a little differently.
Do any of you guys remember if it looks like they had signs?
They
Oh,
were,
yeah.
There is a notation that there were
There were
signs, I just
signs
couldn't
that
find
people
it.
put in their front lawn.
How big were they,
Oh, gosh,
yeah,
they weren't
Deep.
large,
like
Yeah.
this with
but
little
they, they
stakes.
were
Little
colored,
stakes.
and you could see it, it was very noticeable.
Okay.
So we should try to find it and try to find who did it. I mean,
I think,
There was a mention of who the
Probably
graphic
I find it.
artist was.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, Jen, what did you say?
No, I was just saying, I think we have it in our legacy binder from this committee, but,
Yeah, somewhere the name of the graphic designer, I found it, but I don't
okay.
recall where I found it now.
okay.
The butterfly from Pollinator Pathways sign, which I have on my property is, it's like a tin, a very,
Yeah.
it's a very thin tin, like
That's
stamped,
nice. Yeah,
which might be better than plastic.
I agree.
If we could, yeah, if we could find
Yeah.
Cost.
a source.
Yeah, the ones that I really liked, the $30 ones, those were all metal.
Yeah, yeah,
Expensive taste.
Yeah, always. But yeah, so I think we can, I would be, from a precedent standpoint, it would be great to find out, like, do you guys remember when the Lawn for Lobsters one, were they plastic or were they metal, or do we know?
You know, Paul Hogan showed me the one that he still had on his lab.
Oh, he still has one?
I mean, it's very weather beaten, and he might still have it there, but he sort of walked me to the spot on his property to show me where it was.
Okay.
So
Well, that's a great
it may
reason.
still be there. But I totally support you in that this is a placeholder, and that's what budgets usually are, is a placeholder, and then the research and the, you know, once we get the okay, then you invest the time and the money to go and find the source and all that.
And I think most people would be willing to donate $5, frankly. You know, I mean, if they couldn't, then they could get it for free, and that would be fine, but
Mhm.
I don't mind trying to recoup some of the money, for sure. Okay. So, thoughts on this?
And then just to
Oh,
finish briefly, Carol, I'm sorry, I do have kind of a draft of the pledge, and I was gonna send it out this week, but there were so many other agenda items and things to read, I thought I would just kind of hold back, so I will send something out to everybody shortly.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great, so we'll have that on the January agenda to talk about, and
Okay.
hopefully by that time, I'll know, be able to find out more about signage. Is York still using a sign? Not to beat this dead horse.
I need to find that out,
Okay.
I've got a number of questions that
Okay.
I would like to ask them.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so the budget that I have here, thoughts, is it too big, too little? Did I forget anything?
I have a comment.
Yeah,
I think only doing 2 samples of the pesticides, water samples, is too few. I
okay.
think I had initially said 6 or something like that.
Did you, I wasn't clear, now, I think that we would be, obviously we'd be doing more at Goose Rocks Beach, but I don't know whether you mean 6 one-time locations, or 3 locations twice, or I don't know quite how that works.
Well, I don't know about this obviously at Goose Rocks Beach thing. You know, show me the money.
Well, the process is we have to ask them for the money, and
Yeah.
if they want it and they recommend it, then, I mean, they might get it and we might not, because that's 2 different processes. We would go to the Board of Selectmen, and they go through Lori to the Board of Selectmen, but they have a budget, a significant amount of money that was set aside for them as part of the lawsuit.
Yeah, the reason I say it's too few is what you get out of one of the $500 is they give you a listing of the pesticides that they looked at, they tested for, and there's 100 or 200 of them. And next to each one, it gives a concentration, and it indicates whether it's detected or non-detected. Now, it sort of varies from sample to sample, so, you know, you could get one sample and it's all non-detects, and the next one, it's got a lot of detects, just from, that's the way environmental variables are. They change a lot from time to time and space to space. So usually it's a better idea to get at least several, you know, 4 or 5 or 6, rather than just, well, one is not a good sample.
So you're talking about multiple samples from the same location, right?
No, I'm not. We were talking about, in what I had suggested, it was, say, 2 or 3 locations and 2 or 3 samples from each
Per
one.
location.
I think we should ask for more money for that.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree too, is
'Cause 2 is,
insufficient.
Okay.
And we could footnote it as well to say, subject to dollars allocated through BAC, you know, for X number of samples, so that we could possibly give it 2 numbers. One is, this is what we would want in total, including at Goose Rocks Beach, but then just the footnote that says, we're hoping that their budget would fund this amount of it. So we're still showing the complete picture of what we want sampled, and if that might actually motivate them to approve the testing from their budget, I'm hoping.
Now, would we want to do these at different times of the year, depending on summer versus fall, or when more
Well, it's-
pesticides are being used?
It's mainly during the period when the pesticides are being applied.
Summer.
And the idea is you measure right after a rainfall. So you don't just say, I'm gonna measure on December 13th, or, July 13th. It may not have rained for 3 weeks.
Right.
So you wait, you're ready, and then when it rains significantly, you take a sample from 2 or 3 different locations, and then send that in one big FedEx box, and they do the 3 samples and send the 3 analyses back to you.
So what would the recommendation be on where these locations would be?
Somewhere in Kennebunkport, where would we think the best place would be if we do choose?
I mean, do we need that for our budget approval, or are you anticipating the question?
I am absolutely anticipating the question.
Okay.
No,
So
I mean,
maybe that's
the-
something-
Just so, I have to get this budget in just in, I think, bare bones format by the end of this month. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, by January 3rd is the date.
Okay.
I think it would make sense, given that some of these numbers are so much bigger than we've been asking for, to have some level of what's behind
Mhm.
these.
Backups,
We
yeah.
can just pull it out of the usual spot.
Well, I would think, 3 main areas of town, Ocean Avenue, Goose Rocks, Cape Porpoise, maybe a river.
Mm-hmm.
Well, according to Curtis Bolin, who advised on this, you take a spot where there's a pipe, a stormwater pipe that's emptying out someplace, whether it's in the marsh or a river or whatever, and you take the water sample at that location where the water's running out of the pipe. You fill up a couple of quart bottle, and with that water,
And we've got the summary report of enhanced monitoring and pollution source tracking efforts in the Goose Rocks Beach watershed. And they have maps in here of all the places where they've tested specifically for E. coli and other things, not for pesticides. But why don't we use this information and take a look at their sources and then see which ones would make the most sense for what we want, rather than reinventing the wheel or.
well,
That's just for the
the
Kennebunk River, though,
town
isn't it?
also, as part of that program, produced information on where these outflows are. So
Yeah.
they have them all mapped.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Is that
at
map
Goose
in-
Rocks Beach area, and I suspect they also have it for the rest of the town.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so you know where that is, probably, I'm sure Warren
Yeah,
would know that.
there's,
Is it in the comp plan, I don't think it's online on the town website, so I'm just trying to get a sense.
well,
Would it be the
yeah, I think Werner
Werner or
provided that
Chris?
information to us.
I'm sure Chris knows because he's responsible for keeping them operating.
Yeah, he probably knows too.
I mean, but I guess what I'm thinking is maybe a couple of us can,
Make a recommendation.
look
Yes.
at what's been existing and historical in terms of testing, water quality testing specifically, and then,
Yeah,
Add
but they
to-
aren't looking at these locations, they're out more in the streams.
no,
and
these are right at, I mean, I can, here, you can borrow it. You'll see, they're at pipes, they're at, they're at outflow areas, so, and there's multiple maps in there, so, anyway.
Carol?
No, these aren't, these locations, I've been to them all, and they are not at these water outflow pipes. They're more, where the stream, Smith Brook, goes next to Dyke Road, and you can park your car and walk down and sample it. And Beaver Creek is similar. It's right, you park where the stream goes under the road, they park, walk down and sample it. So these are, the water outflow pipes tend to be back, on Wildwood going back into the marsh.
Huh.
And you may have some over by you too.
There is something, I don't know if it's between the small marsh in front of my house and the main road, there's
Yeah.
one there.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
So
Chris-
who wants to, because I want to get on to our next agenda item, who wants to get some detail? I will, based on what you guys are saying, I will budget for 3 locations and 3 samples, so that's 9.
Yeah.
But we just need to know, have a recommendation on where those locations would be.
Well, I can volunteer to get the information from Chris or Werner on on these specific locations.
Okay. Okay.
I can loan this to you because there's multiple maps and they may have more than just those.
No, I have that actually.
Okay.
I thought you said they were sampling at the outflows and I didn't think that was the case. And yeah, I know about that report.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, take a look, because this says municipal wastewater infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure, catch basins, plunge pools, and outfalls. So I'm just saying there may be more than meets the eye here. So, something to use as data.
Okay.
I'm wondering if any other towns have done this. Do you know?
Other pesticides, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I asked that of Curtis Boland and also of Mary Tomlinson. They're both on the Board of Pesticide Control. And they did some limited sampling up at Casco Bay about 10 years ago. And they found some pesticides. But the main thing that they recommended looking at, which I think I forwarded to you all, is this report of what they call the 10 cities study, where they took a lot of water samples at, like, Calais is a city, Portland obviously, but believe it or not, Biddeford is a city in Maine. So it's one of the 10, and they did sampling at outflows several times at each one of these 10 cities, and they have a report. And they found detects of pesticides at all of these cities a large fraction of the time. I mean, they didn't detect all 100 pesticides, but maybe 10 or 20 or that sort of
So
thing.
I remember an email in which you talked about it. Was that study, was there a link to that?
Yes.
Okay. Would you mind sending it again?
Thanks, Steve.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the budget?
So we're pretty much thinking 10,000 at this point, if I'm adding another.
3 sites, that's 9 tests at 500 a pop, so that would be 4,500.
Mhm.
And then with the rest of the budget.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, again, it's possible we could slim down the no pesticides signed number, quantity.
I think so. We could slim it down.
350
and
for
I
the
think-
first year.
And I
something
think we
like
could
that.
recoup it. I think we can ask for
Yeah.
a donation if that's legal, which I assume it is, if other towns have done it. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, because that's gonna be pretty eye-popping. Okay. I will revise this and send it out to folks, and they can have any last-minute thoughts. Again, the due date is the 3rd of January.
Okay.
Okay.
And do you know, Carol, whether or not the budget review is at a Board of Selectmen meeting, or is that, do you know whether or not we could attend and be able to be there to answer questions, or does that sort of happen with the financial people and not really at a?
It's happening this year differently than last year, so I actually don't know, but I'm assuming that, yes, we will have unless they're just gonna give us whatever we asked for, that we would have highly
An
unlikely,
opportunity, yeah, okay.
the opportunity to.
It'd be nice
talk
just to
it through.
know sort of what that process is, so that if we need to attend and show support.
I will certainly let you know. Okay. So next thing, more jingles. Next thing on the agenda is just updates on any other ongoing issues and projects, question mark. Does anybody have anything else they want to report before we move into discussion of a potential ordinance? No? No?
Only that, I have met, and I don't know whether we want to go into that now, but are the public.
Did you say that you said you wanted to just listen today? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to talk about what Piper and I are working on, and after meeting with Jen, meeting her at the polls, right?
Yeah.
I felt like there's a lot of alignment, and if you want me to talk about what we're working on so far, I can do that now.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Great.
Okay.
You have to come up to the podium. Yes.
The mic.
Yes, you do. So
Okay.
our listening audience at home, or anyone who watches it taped.
Okay. Hi.
So Julie, yeah.
Yes.
So introduce yourself and.
I'm Julie McLeod, and I live in Arundel. Was approached by the previous community planner for Kennebunkport, Eli, and right before he ended up transferring out to another job, before Michelle came in. It was he was approached me about working on some project that would bring education and awareness to the towns around pesticide use. And so we were just sort of brainstorming and talking over coffee, and he had an example. I think it was the town of South Portland that had put out a educational awareness raising calendar. And so we were just talking about that idea as a really great way to just sort of get a lot of information, out there to the community, and talked about getting an artist involved and really highlighting all the areas in our town that we all love and want to protect, and doing it in a way of like educating about what are alternatives to be using in our landscapes, not only what we're wanting to protect, but also the things that are in danger, the wildlife and the waterways and all of it. So there's a lot to it, obviously, and so we're working through kind of each month right now. Piper and I are working together on what would be sort of like graphically we can showcase something beautiful that is also, and then adding in some concepts in there and information, and then also resources so people can find out more, because we can only fit so much into the calendar setting. But I think, I had no idea what all of you were doing and working on until I met Jen and talked to her, and so I was very glad to hear that of your work that you were already doing, and that we might be able to help each other in terms of getting out information, or at least sort of communicating things that you want to get out there that we can add into the calendar, things like that. So
when you say a calendar, do you mean a listing of events, or do you mean like a thing that you put on your desk that has a picture of stuff and,
Empty dates until you fill them up.
correct?
yes, sorry, yes. So an actual calendar. And when we first started talking about it, we thought it could be a fundraiser. Eli's been talking to each of the trusts and getting them involved, and doing this more as a fundraiser, and then the money would go back to all of the local trusts. So I've met with Arundel, and he has met with the Kennebunkport and Kennebunk Land Trusts. We're still in the very beginning stages of all of this. So right now we're working on getting 3 months drafted up with the artwork and the content to then take back to the trusts and, kind of get the sign off. So we haven't, we're in the gathering information stage right now, in hopes to do for like a 2023, 2024 calendar year. Our goal would be to get something ready to print by the summer, and we have the summer crowds and people that are, influx and here, and just kind of getting it out into the community at that point for the following year. So.
Do you have photographers that you're working with, or is it going to be drawings? Or
So painting. So Piper
Painting.
Castles is a local artist.
Got it, okay.
Does a lot of wildlife painting. Beautiful, beautiful work. So
Yeah.
she does a lot of her own. She likes to do her own photography and then paints from that photography. So we're working on highlighting different properties of the, things that we want to highlight at different properties of the trust, different places around town, Goose Rocks Beach, Timber Point, things like that. And my background is in ecological landscape design, and so a lot of the information that I'm bringing to is like alternatives to lawn in general, reducing our lawn, and planting natives, of course, and all of the alternative things that we can do. So
it would be great to just be a beta reader or something like that of what, or even provide, if you have specific, like, questions that need to be filled in, around data or something, just be nice to collaborate and.
Yeah, no, we would love to,
that'd be wonderful.
and, we're going to be doing this, hopefully, this kind of education and outreach on invasives, and that's something that we could, incorporate somehow.
Yeah, most definitely, and that's something that we can incorporate into the
Yeah.
the calendar.
Into the messaging and
Yep.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, it'd be great to just, to align with messaging and anything we can do to help with what your efforts are. It's just this one small thing that
Yeah.
we're doing, but it could be,
I mean,
Just
even
more-
if there's a little spot somewhere that says, take the pledge, lawns for lobsters, or, some
Yeah.
ways to sort of just cross-pollinate.
yes.
Wait, I'm sorry, I'll stop there, no. That would be awesome, I think.
Yeah, it'd be great. And
Yes.
that's, things that could appear frequently, and as your calendar grows, it would be nice if we could kind of add some filler for you. And kind
Absolutely.
of have it work back and forth. Yeah, it's a great idea.
Absolutely. So,
Terrific.
yeah,
Exciting.
yeah. So, thank you, and
Thanks,
we'll
Thank
be in
you.
touch.
Yep.
Thanks, yeah.
Love it. Great. Anything else before, on other ongoing issues or projects that anybody wants to? Nobody done that? Okay. All right, so. Status and next steps, healthy ecosystem ordinance. So a little bit of context for everybody. The process for an ordinance in this town is that we need to work with the town, both the select board and the planning department, prior to actually officially, what's the word I want? Giving it to them.
Putting forth.
Yeah, submitting it is the word. And I think, as you recall, last year, the date for submitting it for the November election was the end of June, the third week in June, and that, a lot of work would have to be done. We didn't do it properly. We did not do the work getting people acclimated to what we wanted to do and selling them on the idea. We just gave a very brief presentation, and we did not get anywhere with it. So this time, we are going to do it differently. We're going to just spend more time educating the people who make the decisions and moving ahead with that. So I don't think we need to put any kind of a time frame on it, because I think we need to just move along and massage the process until it happens. So with that, I think we just should go around the room and talk about what we all think individually think should be in it. And of course, because Steve's been taking the lead on this, I'm going to ask Steve to talk about what he's done for research and what he believes should be part of the ordinance.
And high level, right? Not getting into
Yeah.
specifics, just more like this would be covered, this is what, yeah, okay.
Because we have about a half an hour left.
Okay, I can make this pretty brief. You know, we started looking into more details on the pesticide usage and what's been done in the state of Maine and elsewhere, and contacted some more people in the Board of Pesticide Control, reviewed a lot of the other town ordinances and a lot of literature on the effects of pesticides that's in the, not only has been done, studies been done in Maine, but elsewhere. And, you know, I've been trying to consider that in terms of the needs of Kennebunkport. And one of the persons who was the greatest help was Curtis Boland of the Casco Bay Estuarian group. Forget this. The exact name. He's also a professor at University of Southern Maine and on the Board of Pesticide Control. And he's the one that they recommended would be good to ask about how to do the sampling and the strategies to use, and provided a lot of useful background information. And another person is Mary Tomlinson at the Board of Pesticide Control, who oversaw the 10 cities study where they sampled the pesticides. So, you know, just with a lot of reading background information, talking to people. Then there's two different categories that I think you've put on here. One is the pesticide and fertilizer application reporting. And the state already does this, but on a kind of a broad brush basis. And in talking to Curtis Boland, he said it hasn't really worked out that well, and because people are just reporting it and not in a specific format. So that's a whole lot of work to combine it, figure it out, add it up, so he's sure they're missing a lot. And when I told him that we were thinking of having something like a Excel spreadsheet format with a specific format, he said, oh, that would be a great idea, so then everybody's sending it in on the same format, and whoever's analyzing it can just take them all and easily copy and paste them together, databases, and do the analysis then. So, you know, there's one thing is to streamline the state process, which according to him is missing a lot and is hard to analyze. And also you know, we are using the terms pesticide and fertilizer together, and there are some fertilizers that contain herbicides, which are considered to be pesticides, but we're also considering just including the general fertilizer category, you know, just the 10-10-10, 28-2-0 like you buy, that doesn't have the chemical pesticide in it. Because of all the water bodies, you know, that we have, and the seaweed and the lobsters and so on, even the regular fertilizer without herbicides in it runs off and can cause algae blooms and a lot of other stuff to happen. So we're kind of throwing we're putting the pesticides in and the ordinary fertilizer under this umbrella of reporting, and thinking about having more detail in our town. And we're trying not to identify specific people and locations. You know, like have the company report, I put 3 tons of atrazine on Jennifer Camo's property last Tuesday.
No bells.
Yeah, so you, because then there's privacy rules and that sort of thing. So we're asking them, as is done in some other town ordinances, to just report, first of all, monthly instead of daily, and then in areas of town, just dividing the town up into 4 different areas that make some sort of geographical sense, and require application data on a monthly basis for those 4 areas, and not breaking it down by people. Oh, and before that, there's a need, we are considering of having all the professional applicators register in town, and there's a fee of undetermined amount, which would be assessed to them. So that's one aspect, is just the reporting. And by the way, the ordinance really doesn't discuss education at all. That's a separate thing.
Right, that wouldn't be under the ordinance.
Yeah, so and then the next item is, should there be any restrictions on specific pesticides and fertilizer applications? And there's a lot of opinions on that, and we're considering all the pros and cons of that. And we have identified lists of that other organizations, such as the World Health Organization, WHO, and several US agencies have made lists of, these are the top 10 worst pesticides, and they usually break it down by pesticides, that is, against trying to deter insects, and then herbicides. And there's a lot of that applied especially by the big agricultural groups, where they put it on the seeds. You know, there's an herbicide right on the seed, and also on your home you can buy weed and feed fertilizer and pre-emergent things like that. So we have a list, of sort of a ranking of the ones that are the worst for the ecosystem, that we're considering putting that together. And so that's sort of a quick overview of what's going on now.
How, and I haven't looked to see what other, like Portland and South Portland do they list the actual chemical compounds in terms of what's not legal? I mean, I'm just thinking as a layperson, you know, there's all these long names that are, I'm not familiar with them. Does that mean that a Kennebunkport resident would have to go to the hardware store and scan each thing that they wanted to buy to see if any of those things were in it? I'm just thinking of practically how this works.
Yeah, well, you bring up a good point of whether you should consider the individual
Chemical.
person, the private person who goes to Ace Hardware and buys something,
Yeah.
or are we only considering the professional applicators? And there are a lot of those around. And it would be a little tougher to get the individual people to fill out an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm not quite sure how that would work.
Well, for the registration, yeah, I'm just thinking of, you know, I'm just trying to figure, I had thought that the ban, per se, that we've talked about would be for everybody, not just applicators. And so I'm just saying,
Yeah.
as a practically, because these are the kind of questions that I know the Board of Selectmen is gonna ask, like when somebody comes up to me and they go, I don't even know what this is, how do I know whether I'm putting it on my lawn? You know?
Well, there is information on all that, and you're right, there's the list of of actual names of the
Right.
substance, carbonyl or something.
Right.
And then there's, that it is in 7 or some, some
Right.
commercial product. And when you go to the store, you buy 7 or Roundup or whatever
Right.
that you find on the shelf.
And
And,
I don't,
and
would
what-
they, I'm assuming that if, you look at 7 or Roundup, that any of these chemicals are gonna be listed in their ingredient list? Or do they not have an ingredient
Well,
list?
yeah, they're listed on the ingredient list, but often I've found that some commercial products like 7 may have varying ingredients from year to year and from place to place. What they're trying to do is fulfill some specific purpose, prevent germination or mosquitoes and ticks or something like that. And the commercial ones don't always use exactly the same single chemical. That could be a
Right.
combination of
Right.
chemicals and
Do they consider any of that information proprietary?
no, the companies, it's required that they list the chemicals that are in it.
Okay.
I mean, I just want to back us up a half a step and say, I think those are things, once we kind of get consensus around, or at least a majority of folks sort of around how big is the bread box, as we used to say, growing up playing games. Then there's lots of towns who have already tackled this education piece. South Portland has its own website to aid homeowners in figuring out, is this one good, is this one not good? So I would suggest that maybe we don't need to worry about those questions right in this moment, but more let everybody kind of weigh in on what.
I'm just trying to
on what
understand what it all
Yeah,
means.
yeah,
so.
I know, I'm just offering that's maybe down the road, once we sort of have a sense of is what, this was Steve's, this is something Steve's opinion right in this moment. Does Robin have a different one? Does Jen have a different one? Does Susan have a different one in terms of what the scope of this is?
Yeah, I think actually there are fewer actual names, chemical names of the substances than there are commercial products. Because there's huge numbers of commercial products and maybe, 20 or 30 of the major actual chemicals that are in the
Yeah, that's to.
commercial items.
I mean, we can, I think that's a good point, however, and so should go around and maybe try to keep it to a more global thing, but, the old saying, the devil's in the details, is what we're gonna be running into here,
Absolutely.
so.
Well, I think the commercial applicators know this, but it's the private individual going to the Ace Hardware that would be at a loss on some of these things.
And that's where we would come in with education.
Well, besides education, there are towns, Kittery and York don't allow the sale of these 7 in like Eldridge or the Ace Hardware in Kittery. And, we don't have a hardware store here anymore, but there are 2 in Kennebunk, and maybe we could also work with Kennebunk Conservation Commission because, if you have to go 25 miles to buy 7, you might try something, different. I mean, that's one way to address it, too. I would like to see that because, Agway is filled with, they have organic, too, but it just seems like there are some pretty bad chemicals, like Roundup, that I wish nobody sold. So, it'd be nice to work on that, too, because then people are educated when they get to the hardware store and say, I have a weed that I don't like, and instead of Roundup, they get, vinegar and lemon juice or whatever there are things. So I would like to see it, some of that. Because they did that pretty easily. It's just gone, just 1 year, it's just gone, you can't buy it. Eldridge Lumber had a lot to do with that. So,
Well, I think that if we could get one of our local hardware stores owners or managers to
Right,
support it. I think that would help a lot, and it is more awkward because we don't have a hardware store, but,
right.
I mean, so maybe one of the things that we need to do as part of this process is just go talk to them and see not just the clerk behind the counter, but whoever might be making those decisions and see what they say, because we don't know yet,
Yeah.
so. Okay, Steve, are you ready to pass it over to someone else?
Yes?
Okay. Robin, you want to go next?
I think my view has been pretty clear all along that I think it's wrong to just spray every month for the heck of it. And I'm not saying there aren't exceptions at times for things, but in general, it's only been in the last, what do you think, 10, 15 years probably that we've had this, and everybody survived before this. And like Carol made a good point, Lyme disease has not gone down, right? Gone up because of mass spraying. So if that's the big threat, it doesn't seem to be making a difference. So I am, I would like to see that. Just, widespread spraying, whether you buy a fan and some bug spray and some, protect yourself, not, spray the whole town, which is becoming, we are spraying a lot of the town now. I'd be interested to know the percentage of town that is being sprayed right now. It's pretty high, I think, don't you? So,
That's what we were trying to find out, so that's the first part of the ordinance that,
right,
we're suggesting.
right.
Sure. I do think that's important.
Yeah, but I am, Goose Rocks, I bet you 80% at the beach, maybe more, even. And that's,
Probably more right
Right.
along the beach.
and they spray in the dunes. Yeah, I've seen it. So, I think that that's a bit excessive, so I would like to work toward a comprehensive pesticide ordinance for the town and possibly convince local areas not to sell the things that are the worst.
Okay.
And throughout this process, I've always talked about compromise, not an all-out ban of all pesticides, I don't think that would ever work in our town. Or alternative treatments. But truly to educate and then give viable alternatives for the townspeople.
Right?
So would that be as part of an ordinance? So, I mean, when you're saying you don't think an outright ban?
Well, I think what we write in the ordinance would be saying is if it's an outright ban or not an outright ban. It's how we word that ordinance, and then giving alternatives. I'm not sure, I've never written an ordinance before, so.
As I understand it, things like you can't, it's a legal document, so therefore it's more about,
Materials.
yeah, it would be in educational materials, but not the ordinance itself. We tried to put that in the ordinance the first time around, and it's welcome information, but it's not.
It's not part of an ordinance.
Part of the ordinance process is that it goes through
Yeah.
legal counsel and they do all that. All right, well, so I mean, my thoughts are somewhat in the middle here, I think. I definitely would like to see it as less used. I'm very much a pragmatist, however, and I want to do something that works, that is practical, that people can understand, and that honestly has a good chance of getting voted on. It's my firm belief that it's easier to amend an ordinance to make it stricter over time if it's accepted to begin with. So that would be my approach. But, obviously we have a range of opinions here, so I think working through the details is gonna be a challenge. I also think that in some cases that there may have to be some exceptions, I don't know. Possibly some invasives are so bad that some small amount of, I've talked to a lot of people who are organic gardeners who would use small amounts of some kind of substance, whether it's Roundup on an invasive, just to get it out of there and then build up the soil afterwards. So, I mean, it's like most things in the world, it's not totally black and white. And a lot of people that we've talked to who have been very supportive of an ordinance also believe it's not black and white. So that's why we have to figure out a structure sort of to talk this through and come up with something that is simple. And I think going in the direction of simple is also, will help our cause.
I also think that people who are against the ordinance are trying to make it black and white.
Ah, mm.
And this is
True.
something that we need to avoid.
I mean, some of the things that we could talk about were, I mean, does it, and I'm not pro or con any of these things at this point, I just am sort of things that,
Yeah.
I mean, we could think of just trying to make it illegal for applicators, you know, it's because we maybe figure that's where most of the damage is being done. We could consider just having it be in the shoreland zone, because that's where a lot of the water damage is being done. It's not terribly fair, but it also frankly would probably pass relatively easily.
Well, we thought about,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we thought about that a couple of meetings ago and looked into where the shoreline zone was,
Yeah.
and we're told by Werner that they haven't really prescribed it
Delineated.
yet, that what's on the maps is just some approximate thing. So I kind of dropped back off of that, since they don't really know it within 100 feet.
That's disturbing, but.
So, well, maybe they're working on it, maybe,
No
he said maybe 5 years or so,
Oh. well,
they'll
that's-
start having that.
So you didn't say
Really?
that. Wow,
Can I just make one more point before I forget? You know, there is a potential for massive development coming with the passage of LD 2003.
Yeah.
Multiplexes, all kinds of stuff is coming. And, you know, the planning board has jurisdiction to, like, I watched one of their meetings, and they were doing a redo on the marsh behind Goose Rocks Beach, and one of the stipulations for allowing that redo was you can't spray anything. And so they have that jurisdiction, so it's possible that we could kind of kibosh future new development, you know, chemical use, because, you know what I mean?
Everything going forward.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, because sometimes that's how things start.
Yep.
And, you know, and the planning board was quite, I didn't know that, so I asked, how do you do that? And they said, well, we have that jurisdiction. So most developments have to go through the planning board. So
Mhm.
that might be another way to
That's a good idea.
go at it.
Part of the ordinance, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
where,
so we'll let Susan start?
You haven't got, I haven't,
Oh, I'm sorry.
wait, my.
I'm sorry,
I
I'm
haven't
sorry,
read
I'm
it.
sorry, I'm sorry, I thought you had.
I'll wait until, we'll go in order.
Silent.
so where I'm coming down on this is that we do have a mandate based on 2 surveys, and so I'm not here with an opinion per se, as much as wanting to do what it is that 70%-ish of the people who filled in 2 surveys in 2018 and then in 2022 have said. And so I do want us to remember that we're not here with just a bunch of opinions, that we're actually here as the working arms of our voters, our town, and that part of our job is, of course, to educate, because you can say, I want this, or I don't want that, back to your point, Karen, around, you know, people want to make things easy, because that's just how our brain works, is we just simplify, you know, put it in buckets or categories, but the fact is, this is very nuanced, and we have to bring along people in the way we educate them, because it's nuanced. And so, with that, in that respect, I would support something that has exceptions that are very simple, like you say, Carol, and clear, but do allow for exceptions under certain situations. And I also think, working with the Growth Planning Committee to ensure that all new, just as you said, Robin, you know, any new developments have a certain set of requirements that may not have been in existence before. And lastly, I actually think the applicators are probably the most educated versus homeowners in terms of how they would use the stuff. So I'm sort of, yes, I know that it's their business and they won't actually be for it. At the same time, I think they actually have the education in terms of application, and it's the homeowners we need to really bring along, who are just going out and buying something and just, you know, whatever. They don't have the education. So for me, I think that education piece needs to be directed there. So yes, exceptions, and just that's the devil in the details piece. It's the nuance piece. We're gonna have to work it out. I love the idea of all new developments, and I do like the idea of a comprehensive body of work based on what our town people have said they have wanted, by and large. Susan?
Thanks. Very nice. I'm still coming up to speed, obviously, and so I hope you bear with me as I try to learn what's happened before and not put my foot in it when I give my own opinion here. But it's at least my understanding or opinion that the charge of our commission is to inform, protect, preserve the ecosystem of Kennebunkport. And as such, I mean, I firmly believe that it is apt that we talk about prohibiting whatever that group of toxic chemicals is. Splitting hairs, I guess. We can't ban anything. I mean, we don't have the jurisdiction to ban chemicals. We can prohibit the use of chemicals. I think that that's what the state is allowing individual municipalities to do, but we can't ban things. If store owners voluntarily take things off shelves, that's helpful, that helps us. But we're really talking about a prohibition within our town. And I think that's important. But I think that is a really apt expression of our commission, our task as a commission, and I support that. I see kind of two difficulties, and I wasn't around for the first try at the ordinance. We really also, as the commission, don't have the charge, or I suppose the authority, to ask the town to say, we're going to set up registration, we're going to have code enforcement. I mean, those are the things that the government of the town needs to do on their own if they decide to accept an ordinance that we would put forward prohibiting the use of certain pesticides and fertilizers. We could certainly advise if they wanted our help, but I don't know, having this had failed before, you know, was there a perception on the part of the selectmen that we were asking them to take on a task that they weren't ready to take on? Or were we trying to take over the task as a commission? I'm not really sure where that was. And again, I really agree with Carol about you start with what you think you can get passed. And once that's in place, amendments are usually easier, particularly if you begin to have some successes. So I really believe, and Steve, I think, said this, that, I mean, most of the chemicals are being applied by commercial applicators, probably significantly more. And that would be a place to start, although, you know, there is a lot of concern about expressing that in a way that doesn't make us anti-business, because I don't think that is the purpose. And I'm sure that that's a touchy point, but it might be easier to start with commercial applications and then phase in homeowners as our educational programs are able to help them understand better what we're trying to do. So maybe kind of a phased-in approach. And, you know, I can't speak to, I guess, the specific chemicals. I think that, you know, listing perhaps groups of chemicals, you know, atrazine is in a group, or the glycophates, or the neonics, and coming up with categories. But the pesticide applicators certainly know which categories that we're talking about. So I fully support our effort to put forth an ordinance that would prohibit the use of those particular chemicals, but being mindful of the things that we probably don't have the authority to ask for in the ordinance, if that makes sense.
And I think what I would add to that piece is, yeah, I think part of the pushback from the town was that anytime you propose anything that requires more of their staff to do more work, for a good reason, they are not thrilled. And the other piece of that is the enforcement piece. There were questions about that, and that's something that we have to talk through as well in terms of what would be feasible.
Knowing that it can't come from us, obviously, that the enforcement would have to come from.
I think
From
so, it'd
the
have to go
town.
through the code enforcement
Yeah.
officer, and it's not like that department doesn't have a lot to do right now, so so these are, but, clearly, well, so it's almost 7:30. I mean, I would say definitely people want to move ahead with something. Figuring out what that something is going to be a challenge. So does anybody have suggestions in terms of what our next steps would be? I mean, should we talk to the hardware store owners? Should we, I don't know if, Steve, as part of your research, you found out what other towns do for enforcement?
Well, yeah, that's one of the problems everybody talks about. And that it also includes, beside the enforcement, is the analysis of the data. You collect all this usage data, now what do you do with it? So the idea is that I guess the committee would somehow, have it summarized in a simplified way
Right.
and know what they're doing. But then, another aspect that wasn't mentioned yet was the hearing, or not formal hearings, but if somebody wants an exemption, they come and talk, I guess, to our committee. So that's another of the responsibilities.
Which would be giving this committee some kind of legal,
Yeah, I have a real problem with that. I mean, I just can't imagine that we have the ability or the authority to discuss whether someone is legally entitled to an exemption. I just think that
I
would.
think other towns
Yeah,
have
they
done
do.
it, though.
I think Blue Hill, they have I'd like to see what they do with that.
Yeah,
There's quite a few towns that have it.
That would make me a little nervous.
Well,
Well,
we
it's
need to be sure that our town would allow that, or,
it's sort of a thing like the brown tail moth. Oh, it's infesting the whole town. We have to spray. We need to do it right away. And so who is the one that says, yeah, sure, you have an exemption to spray, is it the code officer, or is it us, or a subset of us, or what?
Right.
I mean, typically, if you have exemptions, you have a series of criteria that somebody, has to, something or somebody has to, meet. And maybe we should maybe create that, is what we thought, I think would make sense, and then somebody else with legal authority in the town would enforce it. So that's how I see it potentially working. I mean, but I'm feeling like maybe do we have to get more details from other towns? I mean, I don't know, I think that would be helpful. I honestly don't know if that will convince our Board of Selectmen. Municipalities in Maine tend to not really care what the other towns do. They pretty much like to do whatever they want to do themselves. But nonetheless, it would be good to have that information.
well, if we can show them where things are working and what things are working in other towns,
Yeah.
that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Or what things aren't working in other towns. We
Well,
could work on that.
yeah, we already have the relevant ordinances and have been reviewing them.
Yeah.
Right.
Robin's mentioned some things she found.
Yeah, and also, I'd be willing to contact, some of these places that do have a pretty strict ordinance and ask them, like, how do you deal with your exceptions? I could do that.
I think that would be great, because I know you mentioned exceptions, Robin, and I know even in your business, you have such integrity in terms of how you really support a healthy
yeah.
ecosystem.
Yeah.
And you may know of a couple of where you would say, this is absolutely reasonable.
The only
and,
thing I have ever sprayed with a chemical is poison ivy, because I am severely allergic to it. And, you know, and it takes like very careful, one leaf, and it's, you know, it's not like I take a big fire hose and like, you know, because that stuff is strong, that brush killer. But the other thing is to teach people to recognize things when they're like 2 leaves. Like,
Yeah.
I know all these, and I'm sure you do too, like 2 leaves, then it's not, like if I see poison ivy that's seeded in with 2 leaves, I get my rubber glove out and, you know, flip it in and throw it like a dog poop, you know? So, that's, you know, but you have to recognize it early, that's the thing. By the time it's like, you know, a wall, you know, unless you can find, well, goats, that's the other thing.
Goats.
That
Of
was
course, they
the-
eat everything else too.
Yeah, but I mean, if you have a big poison ivy or
Go
even
to Goat
bittersweet
Island.
patch, you could,
There's
you
a lot
know,
of,
I thought, you know, there are companies
poison
that do
ivy on
that.
all
They
the
just set the
islands.
goats up, they're self-fed, watering, and they eat everything. But I've used brush
Big-
killer sparingly on poison ivy, that's it, ever.
Steve, what do you think the next steps would be? Or do you want to assign people to do stuff, or what do you think?
Well, you've mentioned looking at the other ordinances. I think it's important. There's several aspects of those, you know, there's the reporting, and I think you and maybe Jennifer or others have talked to people, and I don't know where it is, Falmouth,
We
Blue
talked to,
Hill.
yeah, we talked to people in Falmouth, and they actually, the ordinance they do have in place is the one that we wanted to do, which was the registration and the reporting of what is sprayed. That's been in place for 5 years, and they haven't been able to get that any further. And they also have to do, they as a committee have to do all the inputting of data themselves manually, which is something that we definitely do not want to do. So certainly having your Excel spreadsheet idea is the way to go on that.
Yeah, and then there's who's responsible for determining when there's violations, you know.
So,
Supposing you say you shouldn't do such and such, and then somebody does it, and
Can
how
we-
do you,
Can we talk to the town itself as we're processing through this ordinance? How these very questions could be answered? How they
Yeah.
would look at that instead of just throwing it?
yeah,
Down on the
we're
table.
definitely going to want to do that.
Yeah.
Depends on what point we do it. I mean, do we
Right.
do it when we're sort of unformed now, just to see what
I think
they
the
do?
earlier the better.
Yeah, I think the more we can involve them, the more chances that they will have a vested interest in the final product.
Yeah.
So should I invite Werner to our next meeting?
I would think that would be a very good idea.
yeah, we could focus on just the things that he could contribute to.
Yeah.
And the other question I had is there a member or two on the Board of Selectmen who we should be communicating with specifically? I don't know how stuff happens in the town, but should we be talking to one person or what, or not any, or should
A contact person or something.
contact person who
I
would,
think we should probably talk to them all, possibly individually, you know, as we move through this. Start with Werner, and then, you know, whoever has, you know, like us, you know, you can't have more than 2 of them meet without it being public, and this would be an informal discussion, you know, just to help educate and hear their concerns. So you could probably set those meetings up in the new year.
When we had that meeting with the select board, something that I definitely picked up on was they want to help us with the language.
Right.
They want in on the language.
Right.
That was pretty clear, I thought.
Right, yeah. And
I mean, not
I
the
think
facts,
Werner, when
you
I,
give them the
remember I
facts.
tried to
Right.
I tried to get a Board of Select representative
Yeah.
on this committee,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was not something they were interested in, but they pointed me towards Werner as the person who would be our intermediary. So, we can start.
well,
with
when
that.
I first was on this committee back a year and a half ago or something, wasn't it Weston who was
Yes,
attending our meetings
Yes,
when they were all Zoom?
yeah.
several of them, yeah, and he and I talked, Jen and I talked with him
We met with him, yeah.
in January, I think,
Oh,
last January.
I thought Dykstra might be interested just because he's, you know, in the comprehension, the
Yeah,
conservation, you know, he seemed like, someone that might be interested in it, but I don't,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I
don't
do,
know.
I agree with you, those two are the folks who I think would be
They
the
seem
most,
to be the most interested.
yeah.
Mhm.
But as you also said, we should talk to each one, I think, just to get a feel for
Yeah.
how they can help us, how we can help them.
Okay.
I don't know what you mean, we're all, they come to our meeting one at a time? Or one of us meets with one of them, or what?
I think something more informal.
Subcommittee, like
Oh.
other people meet.
Yeah, or a subcommittee, I mean,
Yeah, I think so.
you guys are the subcommittee, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, we could just make the rounds and
Right.
talk to them individually.
come back and tell us what you hear.
But in terms of, I think in terms of the formal process that we're going through, yes, definitely having Warner at our next meeting
Oh,
and having
yeah.
him as our official sort of point person, even while those other conversations are happening, I think is great.
And he is good with language.
What
Would-
about this? I didn't even realize that Eli had left. So
Oh,
there's a new
Michelle.
person now?
Yeah.
Yes, he left to go to South Portland.
Oh,
And Michelle. Thank you.
so should she be a person we talk to
Well,
also?
she works for Werner,
Oh,
Okay.
so I think that he's the first person to start with.
oh, I see.
And he is also, she's doing a planning job, but she doesn't, and she has experience in a lot of things that are similar, but she's not a planner per se. I don't know if that matters or not.
Isn't she supposed to be doing the short-term rentals? Isn't that why that position was,
I think the administrative part of it,
I
right?
think inspections and stuff like that.
Okay.
That's what Eli was supposed to
Was
be
supposed
doing.
to be
That's,
doing.
that's how he was approved at the town meeting in 2021.
So, all right, so we are over and we have to let folks go. So we'll have Werner in next. I'll come up with as part of the minutes and send them out to everybody so you guys can add in, because I know I didn't get everything. The issues we came up with, the various things we can consider moving forward. It'll give us a little bit of a record to start drilling down.
And I think it would behoove us to look at those other towns' ordinances
I agree.
with a particular eye on exceptions, so that we can just have it delineated, spreadsheet, boom, South Portland, what are the exceptions? Kittery, what are the exceptions? Blue Hill, what are the exceptions, if any? And this
And
way,
in- and
we
in-
will have a kind of a sense of,
And enforcement, I think.
yeah, I mean, I'm still of the opinion that it's like, there's a thing that says you can't walk your dog off leash at Goose Rocks Beach between X and X. You know, there's the occasional police person in the summer, but it can be a rule. We have past precedent that there have been rules made, and there is enforcement that is more
Sporadic.
trusting in the public to follow the rules
You know-
with some sporadic
You know what I
enforcement.
think is analogous is the rule that you're not supposed, this is actually state law in terms of what you cut in the shoreline zone within 75 feet of water.
Right.
We all know there are people who have cut beyond that, and I don't know of a single incident in town where that's been.
I do.
Do you?
But
I do too.
Yeah.
it's my
Okay.
point too.
So
Yeah.
is
That's my
it,
point
but is
too.
it the same, do you think it's the same though, that it happens sometimes but not always? or-
Of course, yeah. But it shouldn't prevent us from passing an ordinance.
No, I'm just thinking if that's a precedent, like,
Right.
here's something that you don't have somebody out there, measuring trees on the perimeters, but perhaps somebody calls and says, this person is doing that, and then it gets followed up. And is that a similar kind of thing as to what we're saying?
Yeah.
Well, the one instance that I recall was very obvious.
Yeah, me too.
Right. And on that note,
Wait, jingle the bells.
okay,
Make a motion that we end the meeting.
okay, there you go.
Just second it.
I'll actually second.
What about
All in favor?
Oh, she already-
Aye, and thank you to Maine Media, if that's the right word.
For bearing with us. And
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you for our Zoom
And
host.
thank you, Julie, for coming.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
coming.
thanks, Julie. Appreciate it.
I've seen you more in the last month than I used to see you all the time.
Well stated on your points.
Oh, well, it's, I want to be very careful. You guys have been working on all these things for so long, and it's not always pleasant for somebody to just jump in and say, well, I think,
So
So,
I'm gonna
don't let me
look
overstep.
up all
Thank
those again
you.
and
Karen,
find out
sorry.
how they, there were some good ordinances in there, and they
Yeah.
were pretty
Yeah, I
clear
know.
cut, I thought,
I'm
but
so
to find out.
Yeah, I printed, this last little go around, I printed them all out again and read through them and tried to copy